Everybody, hello, hello. If you are tuning in live today from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or wherever else, please make sure to say hi in the comments so we know that you're here. Throughout this discussion, please ask questions, especially if they're difficult, controversial, like scary questions. We want to hear those because this is one of those topics that I feel like is so often misunderstood. And that's why I'm so happy to have our guest here with us today, Dr. Valerie James. Dr. Val is absolutely wonderful, which you're about to see. I have a confession that last week I got COVID and I was feeling like death. Today's like my first full day out of bed. And I'm like, oh man, we can't push off Dr. Val because not only is she amazing, but it's her birthday today. And we scheduled this thinking like, yes, let's do this on her birthday. And so, Donna, hello. How are you? And Juanita, hello from Facebook. And so the one thing I was not worried about was, with COVID, the first thing that happened to me was I got so fatigued and I'm like, oh, am I going to have the energy? There's something about Dr. Val that when she enters the room, she gives you energy. Like this woman has so much energy in addition to the intellect she's going to share. But without further ado, I want to officially introduce Dr. Valerie James. She is the founder of Unsugarcoated. Dr. Val has served in many leadership roles, including elementary school teacher, literacy coach, adjunct professor, literacy facilitator, school principal. Her doctoral work of study, educational leadership, and ensuring equity for all stakeholders has provided her with a solid foundation necessary to develop expertise in identifying discriminatory perspectives and behaviors that marginalize women with a focus on the workplace. A breadth of professional experience coupled with research experience has afforded her the opportunity to develop expertise in the framework of microaggression, micro-assault, micro-insult, and micro-validation, which are things that we cannot leave today without getting into what those mean. Dr. James views professional learning as the cornerstone for providing a sustainable and rich experience for all stakeholders as related to teaching and learning. Her ultimate goal is to ensure that professional women are equipped, empowered, and encouraged. Dr. James, thank you so much for being here. And I go back and Dr. Val, Dr. James, what do you prefer for this setting right here?
And is that I'm a doctor. You can call me Dr. Val, you can call me Dr. Valerie, you can call me Dr. James. And so recognize and I appreciate and respect and honored that you would definitely ask me for clarification. So it's all on you. So just let me begin by just saying thank you.
Thank you. And that was actually one of our first conversations was what do I call you? Because in your emails as we were talking, you were so formal with Mr. and Doctor, and I'm like, what do I call you? Because I did not want to start our relationship around microaggressions by committing a microaggression, right? And that probably would be one. We could talk about that, but not referring you by your preferred title would be a form of microaggression potentially. And I want to ask you about that. But first, you have to sit in the hot seat.
Oh,
You ready? All right. So we're going to launch our 6 in 60. The rules here are you have 60 seconds to answer all 6 of these questions. So let's do that now. What is one thing that you would like to see stick around after this pandemic?
I want folks to understand that we are here for a reason. Make every day count and maximize your potential every day.
Love that. We're talking about the power of subtle speech in a lot of different ways this month. Do you have a personal mantra, some internal speech that you give yourself?
Tell myself, and someone gave this to me, I tell myself every day, I'm worth it. I'm
Love
enough.
it. I'm worth it. one notable trait of your favorite boss of all time, please.
Transparent and sincere.
Great. So you're a school principal, have teaching experience. We know it's incredibly difficult to be in education right now. What's one thing that parents could do to alleviate that pressure on teachers right now, or show them that they're appreciated?
Parents are doing everything that they possibly can. They are our partners, and I never, ever want a parent to think that they are not our partners. So keep up with just making sure that we are all on one accord and keeping each other safe mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Great. And I know we're technically out of time, but when you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to recharge?
I have a center. Center is where I go. I have a praying closet, and I have a center, and that center keeps me going every day, every single day. Hour. And without giving glory and honor, I couldn't do what I do now. I couldn't discuss what I'm about to discuss, and I couldn't be who I am, and I couldn't have the love and the people around me. Yes, today on my birthday, and including you.
I love that sense of purpose. I love it. And finally, can you share with us one commonly used but hurtful word that might surprise some people, staying on the theme of microaggressions?
Stay awake. Understand when people disrespect you and being disrespectful. It is not acceptable, and it is time to have an unsugar-coated conversation about your behavior, your perspective, and your thinking. So I don't know if that's one word, but hey.
Some powerful words. I love it. I love it. Okay, great. You did it. So, not in 60 seconds, but nobody does it in 60 seconds. And it's your birthday. So, if you want 60 minutes, you got it. You got it. So, Dr. Val, we talk about like microaggression has entered the lexicon. Like people have heard the term. But I don't know necessarily that we all really have a complete understanding of what it means. Can we start at the beginning and sort of define that, what it means? What are microaggressions when you talk about them?
Oh, a loaded question.
Yes.
So I'm going to tell you that first off. But microaggression, honestly, is so disrespectful comments, behavior placed and exhibited amongst marginalized groups, and that includes women of color. That includes women. That can include your age. It's addressing many of the isms that exist in our social context, personal, workplace, and the gamut goes on. It is subtle, disrespectful comments and behaviors.
So it's not just the words that we use. Then it's actually some types of behaviors. Could you give us an example of what those behaviors might look like?
So before we even begin with the behaviors, let's identify the three microaggression types. Right?
Okay, perfect.
Micro insults, and I'll give you a little bit about that in a minute. We have micro insults and we have micro invalidation. So once you recognize and can label those three types of behaviors associated with microaggression, you can then begin to label it and understand it. So let's talk about micro insult. Micro insult is very basic. It is in your face. It's about racism. It is blatant. It is someone coming in your workplace, and I want you to know it happened to me, where they can come around and work in your workplace and call you for the N word, the black. That is a micro insult because you are directly assaulting me based on what I look like, based on how I speak, or how I dress. That's an assault.
Yeah, it
And so
doesn't seem so micro. Yeah.
yeah, but that's this micro insult, because it can be subtle, right? So you can talking about my hair, right? So that's a micro assault, right? So the micro insult is when you sort of it's nice nasty, I call it. So you're nice nasty because what happens is you become a part of where someone insulting you insulting you based on who you are. So they could say, wow, you speak very well for someone in your position. I should speak well every day, regardless of my position. So that can become subtle, but it's there. And so microinvalidation is common as well because it talks about someone who doesn't give you credit for your credentials, right? So that's where you and I met. So it comes quite often in my workplace. Many people refuse to call me Dr. James, Dr. Valerie, doctor at all. They think they are above approach, that they can consider me just Val. I'm at work. I earned my position. I earned it and I deserve it. And so when you see me in a workplace, you see me in arena, you should call me Dr. Val. But there are many who say, why should I call you Dr. Val? Let's be on a friendly basis and just Val. And I get it, but when I'm at work, I want to be considered Dr. Val. So that's the micro invalidation.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things you just mentioned was I've heard that so many times. When I think of a microaggression, I think the first place I go to, if I had, quarter for every time I've heard a white person refer to typically a black woman as so well spoken. So, I forget. There's like one word that's always used but it's used as sort of like a surprise that it was worth calling out that this individual was so well spoken, right? Um, yeah.
It comes from a level of perception. It comes from a level of not knowing. And there are times where it comes from a level of disrespect. And you know what? It must stop. Right. So when you hold a position, you earn that position, you are garnered that position. It should not be a surprise that I can speak well. It should not be a surprise that I can code switch as well. But I don't expect anyone to think any differently. And I love when they show their face because it gives me an opportunity to address some unsugar-coated conversations that are needed. Don't
Yes.
I express myself well? And it all depends on the company. It all depends on how it's delivered as well. So I see microaggression for the most part at work is intentional, right? And so when it's intentional, then it must there are ways to make it happen and to make sure that it is done in a professional way. But before we can begin that unsugar-coated conversation, the environment must recognize, understand, label, and then be able to sustain a different type of environment so the workplace doesn't become a toxic environment.
Yes, and Donna here says articulate, and that's exactly the word that I was not articulate enough to come up with when I said well spoken. And I wonder why it's that word that Donna knew exactly what word I was fishing for. That's the word that comes up. It's uncanny that is specifically this microaggression that I personally see so often in the context of black women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it comes from a space of prejudice. It comes from a space of marginalizing women of color in a space where you're not enough. So I am told always, over and over again, that I am enough. And
Yeah.
so then it's me to let them know that articulation is based on knowing, is based on being self-assured, is based on credentials, and is based on experience. And many people don't think that can come from a woman of color. Let me tell you, Mr. David. I didn't get here by my looks. I got here by my hard work. I got here because I am knowledgeable and experienced. And yeah, anyone who's in that position should be able to, yes, Donna, articulate themselves. And the nerve think that you're surprised about it. It
Yeah.
must stop.
So, but this it would seem would put us in this weird position. I know that when people will overwhelmingly, hopefully, react toward racism, and we're all in this fight together, and we're gonna take care of this together. And I know it doesn't happen as much as it should, but at least if somebody was accused of being a racist, they'd be like, oh, like take offense to it, and like that's not something nice to be called. Here's the thing, though, when you go from people who are the micro assault, right? They're being straight out like trying to offend, to somebody who's calling you articulate. In their mind, are they not, in their conscious mind anyway, are they not just serving a compliment? Like they don't see themselves as the villain in that moment necessarily. So how do you manage that if it's being directed toward you, or if you are the manager or HR director or principal and you see it happening to somebody else? How do you manage that situation, and does it need to be managed with care, and why or why not?
Well, it's upon the delivery. If you remember when we first started the conversation, the subtle insult depends on the delivery, right?
Yeah.
Have many teams, many companies, many departments where there's just a few who will try the ultimate, and the ultimate, they will maximize the ultimate opportunity to let you know that they don't respect you, right?
Yeah.
So it's the players, and it's knowing the reason behind the conversation. So yeah, there are times where the conversation comes up in an innocent manner, but when it happens over and over, it becomes microaggression. It becomes subtle and it becomes insulting. And so it is up to the victim, per se, to recognize it immediately. And then it's time to change the culture. There are steps towards that. That's another conversation, David, with unsugarcoated. Unsugarcoated has a lot of levels, but and we do. I have a lot of levels in regards to how to address those scenarios,
Yeah.
but it's her. And so now it's how do we change the narrative so that it can stop? Based on pandemic, based on wearing these masks, our socialization, how we work, how we move, how we speak is has become a cutoff on seeing folks' face. So now it's up to our words and our actions to change. And when that happens to me, you can rest assured I am very clear on the delivery. And if the questionable, I address it. If
Yeah.
it's direct, I situate the situation. But if it's not clear, I make sure we have a conversation. I begin this unpacking sort of strategic conversation. So,
Right.
what did you do by that? Right. And then you go on from there.
Yeah. And so now you are in a place of power, right? So as the principal, right? So, well, I get it, white dudes saying you're in the, but as the principal within the organization, you are in a place of power, right? When you're talking about people who might feel marginalized in the workplace, and if they are not in a place of power in within the workplace, what do they do if they feel uncomfortable in that situation, because they feel baited, because if they do respond, it can be so easily sort of just sugar coated, right? You're asking them to literally unsugarcoat it.
So so let's honestly, in any business type atmosphere, we have HR, right?
Right.
We have leaders as such as myself. So I think I'm pretty open. I think I'm approachable. And it really is knowing the players, right? You have some folks who are just downright mean
Hmm.
and mean. They come in grumpy, they come in horrible. And then you have some folks who are downright innocent. And innocent in the way that they have carried on like this for a long time in their behavior, in their mannerism, and what they say. And then it's now time to address it. So it's really being clear on at this moment, in this scenario, in this workplace, we are not going to handle each other like that. We're not going to each other like that. And we're definitely going to change the narrative if you think that is acceptable in this location. So it's really giving people the avenues to choose, right? There are times where many may feel uncomfortable. Wow, I am offended. This is happening every day and it's bothering me. And it may very well be your boss who's a
Right.
part of the who's offending you.
Hmm.
And so what avenues do you have? Unsugarcoated has a tool, right? A blueprint. It's called Disrupt. And we give many folks information on how to dismantle that whole atmosphere, that whole language that can be dismissive, racist, or come off that way, right? So there are ways.
I love it. And that really speaks. What's that?
That answered the question.
Yeah, I think it does, and it really speaks to me to the importance of having good mentors that you can go to, and and I could see having powerful sort of mentors who would get it, because sometimes it is your boss that doesn't get it. I could see that that would be a really powerful tool in a situation where you feel uncomfortable in a as a victim of microaggression or witnessing microaggression. We do have a couple questions that have come in from people currently viewing that I wanted to share. So this is Kevin. Said, when I've heard of microaggression, I think it's commonly associated with behavior against women. Isn't it true that men suffer these behaviors as well?
He is absolutely right. So, in my work in the last 2 years, I have had enormous conversations with varying males out there in the world. And thank you, Kevin, for bringing that to the forefront. It is important to address that microaggression just doesn't happen with women. It does happen with men. And the conversation is circling around. We have something called an alpha male, a beta male. We have perception on how society handles males, especially males of color, males of stature, males who have gone through a couple of things and people just don't understand it. And so that is such a great statement and question that you made, Kevin. Yes, microaggression definitely occurs with men. And I think there's some colleagues of mine, Mr. David, that you need to put both of us on so that we can have some conversations about bullying and all that wonderful stuff when it comes
Right.
down and women. And the conversation is real and the conversation must continue. That unsugarcoated conversation. Because yeah, men are a product of microaggression as well. Thank you for that.
Great. Love that. Thank you, Kevin. And William asks, or says, another microaggression that I've seen a lot in the workspace, especially against people of color, is when their English isn't that great, or if they have a strong accent, people just assume they're incompetent and they don't respect them. That really grinds my gears. William, love that.
Who's William?
Yeah, this
Grind?
is William.
I might use that tomorrow when I go when I see some folks in my building. I love that. Grind my gears. You are absolutely right. And I'm telling you, it happens every single day. Why? Because we have folks who believe that folks of color or folks who do not speak or do not have mastery of the English language should not be a part or hold a position that they have. What are you doing to help? I would always approach that person. What are we doing to change that narrative? What can we do to help that person improve? What can we do to make sure that our organization, my team, my department is better? We can do better. We must do better. And what are the steps that we have in place and resources that we have in place to help? And so on sugarcoating can help you with that.
I love that. And we offline had talked about this, like when English is somebody's second language, how people just get louder as they talk to them. They talk to them like they're dumb, right? And go ahead, sorry.
Disrespectful and rude, and they just need to, you know what, stop. First of all, my hearing is pretty well. Let's discuss what the context is. What is this context about? What are we really talking about? I can hear you. Slow down. And it's really just knowing when to recognize that one of the forms of microaggression is happening, and then stop it. Slow it down, back it up.
And Steven says, I see what William describes all the time, and it's horrible. In my opinion, I think those aggressors are just scared and don't know how to handle, so they just get nasty. Very unfortunate.
Agreed. That's why unsugarcoated promotes learning ways and to address.
So we just lost Dr. Val. I'm sure she will be right back. But Stephen, a lot of racism altogether comes from this space of fear. So I think you're absolutely right. And Dr. Val is logging right back in. We're bringing her right back up. There you go. That was not a microaggression. I did not kick you out. Welcome back.
So to address the comment, yes, it's rude, disrespectful, and it is nasty. And that is why we must engage. We must open the conversation. We must have courageous conversations about the subtleness and the nastiness of comments and behaviors that we exhibit. So there's something called bystanders. So bystanders part of this conversation. So we have the victim, we have the offender, but we also have the bystanders. And bystanders need equipments and tools and blueprints on how to get themselves involved as well. So I agree.
So we had this question from, I guess, an anonymous LinkedIn user. I don't know why the name didn't come through, but are there different levels of microaggression for men and women of color? And I'm wondering if the question is comparing men and women, or whether together men and women of color suffer from different levels of microaggression. And you spoke about the three.
So there's three types of microaggression. The level of microaggression depends on the victim and the offender. And I also believe that men and women experience different types of microaggression and how they handle it and how they move forward through it, and then how they sustain so that they can get better through it. I do believe that the level differs on how men perceive microaggression as opposed to women. And but there are only three types, but the level and the scenarios may change. Not all the time.
Now, Kevin says, situate the situation, go on with your bad self. I'm sorry for the code switch. That was very well said, Dr. Val. I love that.
Situation. I say it all the time. If you can't situate the situation, then you may need to talk to Unsugarcoated, because there's a way to situate every situation when it comes down to microaggression.
So now I love that you had earlier talked about code switch. You mentioned real quick, and then Kevin just brought it up again. And I can't separate that from the idea of one of the types of pushback that you see against things like talking about microaggressions and being careful of what you say and it being deemed political correctness is this idea like, why should I have to put in any effort into my speech? I don't mean I mean well, and therefore you shouldn't be so sensitive and whatever, right? In the meantime, you do have this code switching that happens for so many people that are from marginalized groups who literally need to sort of speak the part to blend into the organizational culture in the traditional way that we've looked at organizational culture, right? That there's a specific way that we need to speak within the organization, and who are the ones who have dictated that, right? So I kind of see like the relevance here. Like, of course you have to police how you're going to speak, and how disrespectful is it to not police how you're going to speak when you're talking about negatively impacting people who are constantly sort of working with the way that their communication is received by others, because otherwise they feel that they're going to be ostracized within the organization. Does that make sense? Am I making weird connections here? It might be the COVID.
No, I wish there were more people in the world who had that thought process happening on a daily basis. We come from a society where racism is real. We come from a season where everything is politicized, right? And when we are at work, we should be about the business that we govern, right? So if I'm about the business that I'm governing, then I am able to articulate. I'm able to decision make. I'm able to take risk. I'm able to problem solve. But the complex element that comes into work is when we have folks who don't think like you.
Right.
They don't what they say. They don't police how they behave. They don't police the perspective and being sensitive on who I am, where I come from, or what I've experienced, because they cannot get into that space of, well, I don't know. Being a doctor, what's the big deal? Well, for me, being a doctor became a big deal because you don't know the shoes that I have to walk in to get there, right?
Right.
Doesn't mean that that I couldn't get there, but you don't know that. And I don't know the shoes that it took for you to get where you are, right? So I can't just guess. I can't make assumptions. I have to legitimately have conversation with you, become communicative about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we're governing. But when you cross the line and you become insulting, then we have to stop. We
Right.
have to stop. There's a level of uncomfortability. There's a margin where I can't grow, you can't receive, and I am not receptive to anything you say until we stop, so that you're clear that you're being insensitive, that I am taking it a certain way, that you have clicked a trigger button, and we need to get it straight. And that's where the code switching becomes you become masterful at it, especially when it's you're dealing with it on a regular basis. So yeah, it's a complex conversation, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Really being clear on who you are, why you are, and what you're expected to do. So when I'm at work, I get the governance of what I'm supposed to do, and I expect everyone to get that. But when you stop and you impede me from doing what I'm supposed to govern, then we do have to have a conversation. And the
Right.
code switches.
Right.
Stop. I'm going to get you straight. You can take that
Yes.
anywhere. Because
Right.
you're stopping me from doing my job. You're stopping me from governing what I know I can do every day, all day. Right.
Right. It's time to like press pause, get to real life, because it is this crossover. And I've always had this issue of people sort of clocking out of life in order to clock into work. And I think that we need more authenticity at work. But there is that sort of that suit goes on, and we're all sort of this facade of ourselves. But then when the real world crosses in ways that are not we're not able to push aside. This is real life. Then you're right. You've got to go back to, okay, let's talk in real life.
And so I also think it's really knowing self, and since we're talking about the workplace, is knowing the work that you're governing, right?
Hmm.
And stopping you from doing that, then you have to stop.
Right.
You're impeding me and my responsibility. You're impeding me and my livelihood. And let me tell you something. You're not going to do that.
Right.
I am a bystander and I witness that. I think I need to be accountable to stop it. Right.
Right.
I think I need to be accountable to inform. And I also think I need to be accountable in making sure that the workplace is a safe place. Right.
Yeah.
So it,
And
it is in the layers, is in the layers.
right, and it is this weight that you're carrying beyond just you as well. So if somebody is committing microaggressions against you, Dr. Val, as the principal, and you have young African American teachers or students who are seeing this happen, then that's not good for anyone. And that's why it needs to be handled.
To see it. She's not going to disrespect me in front of anybody. I don't
Right,
care what
right.
where you come from. Disrespect is disrespect, right? Respect is the key, right? It doesn't matter what I look like, but the nerve of you to do it in front of
Yeah, right.
anybody, it must stop.
Yeah.
Disrespect behavior, language must stop. That
And
is the
yeah, and that brings up William's next question. What can you do as a bystander in a situation where you witness microaggressions in the workplace? How do you approach the situation without causing a falling out and making it worse?
so a bystander has it reminds me of the bullying situation. So when we talk bystanders, microaggression is a form of bullying. So there's a level of reporting. And so when you're at the workplace, there's a level of reporting. So it's knowing your system, it's knowing your policy, and it's knowing your practice. Who can I speak to? What are the elements and policy in place to make sure that we address the matter that I'm witnessing on a regular basis or I witnessed one time? So it's knowing policy, it's knowing the proper personnel to assist in handling the situation, especially when you're not sure, you're not comfortable, and you are trying really hard to avoid the fallout. I want you to know, though, when you're talking about microaggression, sometimes the fallout is necessary,
Hmm.
right? And that's where it becomes uncomfortable because the fallout is necessary because someone is being marginalized, disrespected, unappreciated, violated.
Yeah.
So there are times where it is uncomfortable and it must stop. And that's my position. It
Yeah.
must stop. It
Yeah.
must stop.
And in a lot of ways it seems like it is the most toxic form of bullying because it forces the victim to be the one that makes the decision whether to create true conflict from this or to just turn the other cheek and walk away. And that's a really difficult decision to make in the moment, I would think.
It is a level, in the end, it's a level of abuse, right? So, someone is constantly insulting you, constantly disrespecting you. How much more are you going to take? How much more are you to witness?
Mhm.
And you decide enough is enough, right? And you have to aware that it's happening. You have to be able to label it. So if you can't label it, you can't do anything about it. So that's why it's so important in knowing the three types: the micro assault, the micro insult, and the micro invalidation. You can't label it. You can't label it and recognize it. You can't understand it, right?
Yeah.
And then you don't have the with it all to know policy and to know who you can turn to or how to use it in your language and address it, then we don't have what we need. And that is why my sugarcoated started. When we were in the midst of the pandemic, my mentor, she, I don't know if I'm going to mention her name. I'm going to call her Miss Brown for now. She stopped me. We were in serious conversation about what are we going to do as we move on. What do you want to do? And we just kept talking and talking. And I said, I want to have this. I want to be able to talk to many about my experience. I want to tell them about my narrative. I want to tell them how to move forward through it. And that's how Unsugarcoated evolved. This person became my go to. She became my inspiration and motivation to kick this thing right through the door. It's time. Um, and my nature, look, I like to think sometimes that may be true. My nature is to honestly be a peacemaker, right? And so I found myself in positions where the peacemaker role wasn't effective. It
Mhm.
wasn't, and I needed to find a way to stop it. And to let everyone know that you can be a peacemaker, you can sustain um, a work environment that is nurturing, that is motivating and inspiring, but you have to set the climate and the culture. And like you said, insulting folks on a regular basis, small, big, in between, is toxic. And so we work so hard in our own personal lives and our society to stay focused and stay at a space of progressiveness and being productive, there is no way that folks should go to work and feel differently.
Hmm.
Miss.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And you can be a peacemaker, but sometimes it takes breaking somebody down before you can build them back up. And if they don't have the language of what microaggressions are, and they don't have the understanding, and then even the person perpetuating it is in a sense a type of victim to their own biases and their own ignorance. And I would think that that's a spot where unsugarcoated is the answer for an organization that needs some help with this, where it's not part of the dialogue or part of the vernacular of the business. That people are not on the same page about uh, this thing that somebody just in the chat just described as empathy in a word, right? And that's my wife right there. But but really in a word, empathy.
How many hours doing what? I want to hear what she said. What did she say?
Oh, sorry. She said that as a teacher, she spends so many hours teaching this to her students to create adults in the workplace who get it. Big into empathy of people who might not think like you or feel like you or look like you or whatever it is. I think that's really at the core of it. But all of those kids that were sort of missed along the way, you know, who didn't have the honor of having Rachel or you as their teacher along the way, a lot of times it's up to us to educate them now. And so does unsugarcoated help with that within the workplace?
Most definitely.
Right. And that I think that would be as yeah.
Because honestly, when you think about unsugarcoated, and I don't know if she's an elementary teacher, high school
Yeah, elementary.
patient, it is important that we start there. So it's levels. So it's teaching students about how to report when they see something that's not fair, that is against policy at a workplace, against policy, against the culture of the building. It is against the. It is against anything that's not about peace, right? In
Mhm.
school, we are dealing with so many things, and so it's finding ways to let the younger students and the teachers and all in the community, all stakeholders know that that's not what we're about.
Mhm.
We're each other, and we're about being better and doing better.
Right.
If we promote young minds to be better in what is ahead of us, because we're getting older, so they're going to take care of us sooner or later, right? We want that we're sending out the right message, and so kudos to all the educators and teachers out there. Keep
Yeah.
doing your. Make sure you let those students know that it's important to report, no matter how uncomfortable it is. That's where we have to start. And I appreciate you in advance for doing the work that is so hard out there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well said. So we have more questions coming in, but I know we're also coming toward the end of our time. But Juanita asks, how do you think we've progressed compared to 5 years ago? Are we moving forward
Where? In microaggression workplace?
in microaggressions within the workplace? I guess.
I think microaggression is a hot, sexy topic
Mm-hmm.
because it's prevalent what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
Think that we have a lot of work to do. 5 years ago, we may not have been as aggressive about it. And because we're more aggressive about it, the conversation is definitely needed. I
Yeah.
hope question.
So yeah. So but you bring up that it's like the sexy topic now,
It is.
and you, we've had Di Cirolo on in the past who works with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in her book she talks a lot about allyship being like the sexy thing, like yep, I'm an ally, and but what does that actually mean? And we just celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday before celebrating yours today. Happy birthday again! But so for MLK Day, all these people are putting up these quotes, and this was the first year where I really noticed this push on LinkedIn. Like if you're going to quote MLK today, tell us how many, board members are people of color. Tell us how many, what you're doing within the organization, because it is, talk about political correctness. It's about saying the right things now, but that does not necessarily mean that we're making progress or that people are backing it up.
Doesn't about service. So if we think about just Martin Luther King's National in Service Day, it's about service. What are you doing to help others? It's about servicing mankind. So speaking the words and putting your pictures up and putting your quotes up is beautiful. It gives some recognition at on the surface level, but it's deeper than that. What are you doing to help your community?
Right.
What are you doing to help your organization? How are you bettering them as opposed to yourself? Take yourself out the equation. What are you doing to help fellow mankind? So just putting up a quote is beautiful. Look, I love quotes. It starts somewhere, right? But if you were going to go deeper, is what are you doing to help someone else, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's beautiful. Edith also says you can't just talk about it, you have to be about it. I love this. Absolutely. There's so much valuable information here, and inspiration to get out and do something.
You gotta bring me back. You gotta bring me back.
We clearly do. We clearly do. And also anybody who is viewing this in the replay, please feel free to drop questions in and comments and things, and we'll continue to monitor that. But
something else. We might need to come together and do like the male versus the female. We're gonna have to keep coming back.
yes, I love this. I could see a future with Dr. Val co-host. That'd be awesome. So, Dr. Val, this QR code, if somebody raises their phone to the QR code above your head there, that should take them to your contact page on Unsugarcoated's website. And how else can they reach out to you and connect with you?
Thank you for bringing that up. Folks can definitely reach out to me on my website page. They can find me on Instagram and Unsugarcoated. They can find me on Facebook, and they can find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I wanted to thank you for this incredible conversation. Really, it is a topic that not everybody could handle with the grace that you do. I think that you handle these things with such power, but also that empathy that's sort of coupled with it. I think that you are the perfect person for an organization to engage when they foresee these issues within their culture. I know William said, please come back. This is such a good and necessary conversation. Thank you, William. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you all for tuning in. Dr. Val, any final sort of homework for us? Something that people could do today to deal with microaggressions better, whether they are worried that they have been the victim or that they may be the aggressor at times?
So the first thing I'm going to say to everyone is this: recognize when it's occurring. Is someone saying something that sounds insulting, disrespectful, prejudice? And then understand that it is happening, right? Once you recognize and understand, label it. Which microaggression is happening? Is it micro assault? Is it micro insult? Is it microinvalidation? And once you recognize, understand, and label it, then I want you to begin to be able to explain it in yourself and then sustain. Do I need to take it to policy level? Do I just need to address and let someone know you're being insensitive? Or if I'm unsure on how to move forward with that, who can I speak to? What organization, Unsugarcoated, can help me get through this problem? And then let's move forward. And that is my first suggestion to those out there. Really be able to recognize it, understand it, label it, and then be able to explain it. So if you have to sustain and talk about it, you can move forward.
Love that advice.
Don't hesitate to contact Unsugarcoated. Please do not hesitate.
Yes, please reach out to Dr. Val. And I love that homework. I was once accused of a microaggression, which I absolutely committed, and have been committing my whole life probably, as a very loud white man who thinks that everything I say is golden. I was in a meeting, and this black woman, very strong black woman who was on my team, said to me, called me out in front of everybody else. She said, "Do I not get a voice in this?" And went on to explain to me, when I said, like, "What do you mean?" Went on to explain to me that I was railroading her in the meeting and not giving her a voice. And since that time, every time I've been in a meeting, virtually, in person, I'm cognizant of who is doing all the speaking. And I've made this cognizant effort to always bring in the voices that are not being heard, as opposed to railroading those voices because I like the sound of my own voice. So that's my homework for any of you who may be the microaggressors without even realizing it.
Good for you. Good for you. I see. That's what. See, David. You already know. You you get it. That's why you're doing the work that you're doing. Can't thank you enough. We're going to continue this conversation. You know, I'm ready for it. And I applaud you for just having the sensitivity and the perspective, knowing when to sort of back down a little bit and recognize the room, and recognize the space that you're in at all times. That's a
Yep.
great thing.
Well, thank you. And the honor was all mine. Thank you for being here with us, and especially on such a special occasion as your birthday. So happy birthday. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. Please reach out directly to Dr. Val, reach out to us, and we will catch you in a couple weeks. This month, we've been talking about the power of subtle speech with Dr. Val and with Rob Commodori. Next month, we're talking all about passion at work. It's February, the month of love, right? We're going to be talking about passion. So we'll see you guys back for some episodes next month. All right. Talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.